So, I was thinking about what's going on in the world today, like I do all day, every day. And I wanted to talk about inflation, retirement, and why you should be upset about it. So, I don't care if you're interested in economics or finance or money or anything like that. I don't care. If you've heard the word inflation, you should care and you should know what that is. And chances are you've heard it because almost every news outlet, no matter what terrible mainstream media news you look at, has inflation in a headline in an article somewhere, right? And so it's safe to say that 99% of the world, or the common man in the US or the rest of the world, has probably heard of the word inflation and probably at least has a basic understanding of what that actually means. And so the reason I want to have a video about this and specifically talk about your retirement and things like that is because you should be very, very upset and angry right now about inflation. Not about who's president, who's not president, not about what this senator is doing or that senator is doing, not about what law got signed or bill got signed into law the other day. Who cares about all that type of stuff? Inflation impacts you more than any of those things combined, just about. Not who's going to be president in the next couple years, anything like that. So what I mean by that is, let's go through a thought experiment and an example. And let's say you're a typical American citizen, right? And you work your whole life. You have a working life of, let's say, 40 years from your mid 20s to your mid 60s. Okay, let's say an average working life of 40 years. Some people it's going to be more or less, doesn't matter. And in that 40 years, you do your due diligence to, keep up with your expenses, to keep your debts down in line. You own a residence or whatever, a home. You you don't spend too much, and you in that time accumulate a retirement portfolio through your employer. Let's just say it's a 401k. Okay, and for the sake of argument, let's assume it was all Roth by some miracle. So 100% of your 401k, the value's there. It's not going to be taxed on withdrawal. It was paid tax up front. So at the end of your 40-year working horizon, you have all this money that's compounded over the years, and it's all yours to own. So let's just say that's $1 million. And with that $1 million, that amount is enough to cover your expenses to live for the rest of your life each year, right? And so that's a really basic and kind of horrible way to explain how retirement works, but in general, that's the idea, right? You build up a nest egg, you accumulate assets of your life, and then when you're ready to stop working, those assets pay for your expenses and your lifestyle as you age and get older. Okay. Uh, there's a couple things that threaten that, and one of them is highly prevalent today, and that is inflation. Okay, so inflation will basically erode the value of that money over time. And so, even though you've worked really hard to put your $1 million away and you've calculated today that that's going to be enough to cover your expenses, if your expenses keep going up, you're going to have to eat more of that principal, that $1 million away, to maintain your lifestyle. Okay. And so, the reason you should be upset about that is because you're working your whole life. Uh, you are setting a goal, and imagine, you're running a race or a marathon, right? It's 26 miles. Okay. And 26.2. Okay. I'll be official for all the marathon runners. But anyway, you think all I have to do is run 26.2 miles and then I'm set and I'm done and I can go home and have a beer and a good meal and take a nap, right? Well, imagine you're running this race, you're committing yourself to it, you're working hard, you're sweating, you're going to get there, you're making good time based on your pace and your comfort level. Everybody else is running around you too, and everything's great. And then all of a sudden, the finish line is 3 miles further than it should have been. and you don't get your reward of having your beer and your lunch and your, going home for a nap until you get that other 3 miles, right? Well, that might be more than your body can physically take. Okay. And that's essentially kind of like what inflation is doing to your retirement. You have a goal, a set amount of money that you need put away to fund your lifestyle and fund your expenses when you're done working. And inflation is making that money worth less. Okay. So that you either have to work longer to get your principal, your nest egg, bigger to produce more money for you, or you don't get to live at the same standard of living that you did, uh, that you were planning for. So instead of finishing your race and getting to go, have a beer and a nice meal and then a nap, you're going to get like a juice box and a rotten banana or something like that. That's usually like the things they give out at the end of those or whatever. So I'm just making a really bad metaphor and a bad example of this. But basically what I'm saying is you should really be upset about inflation today, right now, even if you're not even retired. If you're retired, you should be really upset about it. But if you're not, um, you should be as well. And you should figure out a way that you're going to address it. Now, like I said, you can do a couple things. You can make your egg bigger, or you can lower your expenses and your standard of living, right, to reduce that. So you don't buy filet mignon, you buy the ground chuck, whatever. You can do those types of things. There's only so much you can reduce, right? Um, or what else? What else is there? What else can we do? Well, we could hope that one day the Federal Reserve would address inflation and slow it down using the tools that they have available to them. But hoping for the government to make any reasonable and sustainable and positive change in your life is a fool's errand. I don't care what side of the fence you are on or anything like that. That's all irrelevant. Who cares? Um, the government will never save you. That's the end of the story. And if you believe in that they have the power to do that and they will, then you're delusional and you're going to be disappointed. I'm really sorry to break that to you. Um, so be mad about inflation. Understand that it's going to destroy your retirement, and it's also going to inhibit the amount of assets that you can leave behind to the next generation. So you should be really angry if you have children, or somebody, heirs of some sort, that you are trying to leave some amount of wealth behind, so that they can get kind of a head start on their lives. And so traditionally, how the idea of retirement would work is you have your $1 million nest egg. It gives you income that you can live off of, but the nest egg stays there and it actually grows a slight amount to keep up with inflation, right? And it still gives you a little bit of money each month for you to live on, but that $1 million basically stays the same and actually grows a little bit over time too to keep up with inflation. So that when you die, you still have this huge chunk of money there that you've lived off of all these years in your retirement, and that money you can do whatever you want with. You can give it to your kids. You can donate it to your favorite charity. You can do, that's your legacy, what you're leaving behind, the wealth that you've generated and accumulated over your life. You get to figure out what you want to do with it, or you can have no plan for it and let it go to the state, which is a tragedy, but it happens more than you think. Um, with inflation, that it becomes harder and harder and harder to protect that egg, right? And at some point it'll get to the point where you have to eat into your principal if inflation is too high, and you're starting to reduce that $1 million to live, to pay for your medical bills, to pay for your food and things like that. And unfortunately for a lot of people, they never get to the point where they have enough assets, income producing assets, in their retirement to fund their lifestyle. They actually just draw down the principal each year, and it gets worse and worse and worse, and it produces less and less and less money. And when they finally die, they have nothing left, and there's nothing to give away. um, and the next generation starts from zero and has to build up that whole ladder again. So it's a complete tragedy, and inflation just makes that harder. And unfortunately, that's the case for a lot of Americans. If you look at any of the statistics out there or any articles, there's a huge majority of Americans that have little to nothing saved for retirement. And so they are going to perpetuate this whole um, cycle of leaving nothing behind. And the next generation is probably going to just continue that cycle, and it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and worse and worse and worse over time. So inflation doesn't help it. You should be upset about it. Let me know your thoughts on this subject, and let's talk about retirement and what your plans are. See you in the next one.